Today's book overview, I want to talk about extreme ownership. Sadly, a book that sat on my bookshelf for a while, but the good news is I eventually got to it. This was highly recommended to me, I think, to anyone who does any sort of leadership, and having a military background myself is definitely drawn to this. It was written by Jocko Willink. If you're not familiar with Jocko, you may know him through his podcast. He's got a very popular podcast, talks a lot about leadership. No surprise there. And co-written by, I probably might mess up his name, but I believe it's Leif. Some really good information in here, but I'm just going to jump into this, that the core argument, the thing that extreme ownership is about, is every failure in a team traces back to the leader and taking that on as a leader. No qualifiers, that's it. If your team doesn't understand the mission, you didn't communicate it well enough. If someone underperforms, you didn't train them or you didn't let them go. If your boss won't give you the resources you need, then you didn't make the right case. So you're owning it and using that to improve yourself, improve your situation, improve the people that work for you and the leadership above you. So this book is structured pretty simply, and I really like the layout. It's 12 chapters talking about a core part or a core idea in each, and each of those chapters is in 3 sections. So they have a combat story from operations in Ramadi, where they were involved in the SEAL teams and operations with different units. They go into the leadership principle. Then they go into the business application after the leadership principle, which is its own section of, hey, here's how this applies in a real world situation that they dealt with, that they had gone on to after military, doing some leadership training with businesses. The combat stories do the job of establishing the stakes and where this came from and why it's important. And I personally found that some of the business stories are a little not as fun to read, but I think that's because, again, maybe the stakes are lower. We're not as concerned as human beings or whatever it is by a management story. But I think most of them are good, and I'm glad they included these in there. I think that it helps translate and gives you another angle to view the leadership principle. Okay, so the core claim, all responsibility flows upwards. So again, we can compress this into one paragraph. So on any team and any organization, all responsibility for success and failure rests with the leader. The leader must own everything in his or her world. There is no one else to blame. The leader must acknowledge mistakes and admit failures, take ownership of them, and develop a plan to win. I think you can take this thesis and that's it. And you can break it down from there, because there's a lot to go into. It's, hey, how do I deal with my own ego? Having an ego is good. I want to be strong. I want to be aggressive when that's called for. I want to be laid back and let someone else do things. But how do you do this? How do you acknowledge mistakes? How do you fire people? How do you deal with their failures? So there's a lot in there, but I think that just understanding this main idea can get you pointed in the right direction. From reading books previously, Kim Scott's Radical Candor, that Kim Scott framed it as a relational necessity. If your direct report is underperforming and you haven't told them that directly, then the failure is yours. So you failed by withholding guidance. So I forget all the quadrants that Kim talks about, but I know that this one, it being too nice to people, is called ruinous empathy. And somewhere in her book, she had said that at least it's not the best option, but better than that is to be an aggressive asshole all the time, because at least people know what they're getting and people will get feedback from you, even though it's going to be over the top. And as I said, not done in a great way, but that's better than being too friendly and not giving critical feedback, anything like that. So you do need to find the balance there and understand that the job is the balance. And that one of the hardest parts is understanding, how do I take responsibility for all of this while delegating? The answer, of course, is you have to find a balance that works for you, that works for your team, that works for your business, your unit, whatever it is. And this is going to slightly change with the personalities, the mission, whatever that might be. I think another one of the really good sections is standards are set by what you tolerate. So here is one of the quotes. When it comes to standards, as a leader, it's not what you preach, it's what you tolerate. I think that this is a great principle. And the note that I wrote to myself about this was KISS. Keep it simple, stupid, and implement regularly for promos and launches. So what they talked about was post-operational debriefs examine all phases of an operation from planning through execution in a concise format. It addresses the following for the combat mission just completed. What went right? What went wrong? How can we adapt our tactics to make us even more effective and increase our advantage over the enemy? Something this kind of maps to is in Decisive. Chip and Dan Heath describes this as the process of good decision making. So they have the WRAP framework, which is WRAP. So widen options, reality test assumptions, attain distance, and prepare to be wrong. And that's what I call the civilian version of what Jocko describes as a debrief cycle. So both arrive at the same conclusion. If you systematically analyze your own performance and then make decisions based on that, you're going to improve faster than teams that rely on intuition or way after the fact narratives. Here's what I think happened. I think an interesting aspect of this is a book I actually read based on reading Extreme Ownership was David Hackworth About Face. And he talks about the same kind of debrief discipline in Vietnam, but he has more skepticism about the institution's ability to learn. You still need to do this because it matters for yourself, and that's why you do it, as well as being helpful for others. But what Hackworth was talking about, where he's watching the Army writ large repeat mistakes across rotations because the feedback loops are broken at like the institutional level. I think that it matters to you because you need to do this and it will benefit people around you. The institution, the company, the division isn't implementing this or learning from it. Another great section is about decisiveness under uncertainty. This applies, of course, across the board, like all of these, but there is no 100% right solution. The picture is never complete. Leaders must be comfortable with this and be able to make decisions promptly, then be ready to adjust those decisions quickly based on evolving situations and new information. Okay. This is true in life everywhere. You're never going to have everything you need, and you need to be able to make decisions. If you're always waiting for 100% or perfection, that's something we all learn. You need to do a good job, but is 80% enough? Is 90% enough? 99? And you're never going to have all the information you need. You need to act and then adapt to that information. So something to take into consideration of this is what we call type 1 and type 2 decisions. Type 1 is like a one-way path. If you go down that path, then it's either, the door shuts behind you, you can't come back, or you've got to just adapt from there. These are more decisions you want to spend more time on and potentially have more analysis, gather more information. But then you have a lot of type 2 decisions in your life where it doesn't matter. You can reverse it. It doesn't have a big impact. Maybe you want to check out a book, but you're not sure if it's worth your time, money, effort. How big of a deal would it be to you to spend $10, read the first chapter, or invest the time to get a library card, check it out, and read that first chapter? And the answer is that for most people, that's going to be a type 2 decision. So why don't you just do it? And then you can change it. You can say, this book sucks. I don't want to read it. Great, move on. And then making them more quickly and entering that loop. And of course, a famous version of this is the OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, act, and getting faster about doing that. Something that I've mentioned, this book, Decisive, they have a little bit of a counterpoint that I think is important. Again, you need to find the balance of this. So what they're talking about is, while speed matters, so does the process. The research they had showed that decision-making improves when you do that WRAP process. You widen your options. You never just say, hey, let's do this or that. Consider multiple options at once. You want to reality test your assumptions. You attain distance from short-term emotion, right? Get the ego out of that. And then prepare to be wrong. What happens if you're wrong? Is it the book example where it's, oh no, I bought a book that I could give to somebody else, or I can return it to the library? Or is it, this could cause financial ruin, or we could bring down a product launch? Like, those are very different things. So I think, again, both are the best approach is probably combining those. Use a bias to action for reversible decisions, get it done, and use that WRAP process for irreversible ones, or quickly think through that if it's somewhere in the middle. Again, finding that for what works for you. Something good that I think ties into this, Nate Silver, in his book On the Edge, he talked about both of these ideas through successful risk takers. And what he said was, successful risk takers are prepared. They make good intuitive decisions because they're well-trained. I think that's an important part of this, is they make good decisions because they practiced making good decisions. And those of us who want to improve can do simple things like writing down our decisions. Maybe in a weekly review, we have a prompt. Hey, did you make any decisions? Why don't you write down quickly like what it was, what prompted you to make it, what your thought process was, and what you expect to have happen, and maybe review those on a quarterly, monthly, yearly basis. Something will be better than nothing, and you can really start to improve over time. There's another part of the book talking about discipline equals freedom. I love this. I'd heard that years and years ago as far as it applies to productivity, just saying that, hey, you have a list, you have this process you go through every day, and that it may seem, some people are like, oh, I hate being boxed in, but by doing that gives you the freedom because you don't have to worry about, am I missing the meeting? Is something dropping through the cracks? No, because you have the discipline, you get it done, and then you get to spend more time doing what you want and less time either being reprimanded or looking stupid or forgetting to get stuff done that lets you do more of what you want to do. I think too that, like many things, it's a balance. Can we be too disciplined? Sure. Can we be over the top? And you just have to look inwards, and that's where reflection is important. And am I doing what feels right? Or do I feel like things are off? Have I been working out, ignoring the family? Have I been working too many hours and things are great at work, but I haven't seen my friends? And you feel that tension, and there's give and take. Sometimes you're on one side of it, but over time you can learn to look at that a little bit more and to pay attention to that. There's a couple other books that touch on some of this. Anna Lemke and Dopamine Nation, that although discipline demands control and asceticism, I had to write that down. Anyways, yeah. Although discipline demands control, it actually results in freedom, the dopamine balance between pain and pleasure. But the same thing results in terms of whether it's hardcore military training or if it's building the systems and the processes in our business that can really be a pain in the ass to build, but they end up helping us forever after we build them. A line that ties into this, I really like, that this I wouldn't have originally thought of when I was reading Extreme Ownership, was from Gary Snyder in Earth Household. I believe the book was written over the late 40s, maybe early 50s. Discipline of following desires, always doing what you want to do, is the hardest. It presupposes self-knowledge of motives, a careful balance of free action, and a sense of where the cultural taboos lay. I think this is important because he also says that doing the things you're not supposed to do is easy because those are laid out. You already know what those are. And so thinking about, what is it I want to do? How can I do those best? And you can extrapolate that into whether it's your business, what's best for your division, your unit, whatever it might be, and understanding that and getting to know yourself, your company, your unit, your people. That can be difficult, but that's where some of the biggest payoff lays. The framework here that Jocko presents is heavy on accountability, and I think that's important. I think checking the ego, which he addresses, is good, but we need to also think about team members and their lives when it's not a 24/7 type of a thing. And I think that Kim Scott's Radical Candor really fills some of the gaps there, and it can be really helpful that we need to acknowledge the reality of the situation. We need to deal with people, and we're running a business. And when push comes to shove, the business takes precedent, but we need to care personally about the people at the same time. And I think that can exist or coexist. And we can also care about them by challenging them and not letting them get away with substandard work. I think that Extreme Ownership, definitely worth the read. I think that one of the best features of this book is the simplicity. And I mean that it's put together structurally so you can really cruise through this and extract a lot of value. The lessons and the ideals that they have learned and presented, they've used, as I said, in the military. They've taught it in civilian life to business owners and leadership. And that it has now been distilled down into this book so that you can take a lot away from it. So check it out. I think anyone interested in being a better leader will do the same.